Welcome to When We Talk Podcast, a place where we talk about everything from life, marriage, being single, conflict in marriage, conflict in relationships. We even talk about faith. This episode is hosted by Kenneth Bonner, Reggie Smith, and Jacqueline Wells. Well, welcome to the When We Talk Podcast. This is Kenneth Bonner.
Reggie Smith.
Today's show, we want to focus on blended families. So we know that this is a very touchy and challenging topic for a lot of people, but I think it's something that needs to be talked about because there are so many people finding love, and with that love they're finding, I'm not going to say it's baggage, but it comes with a lot of responsibilities. And one of those responsibilities is the blended family, entering into a relationship with somebody that may already have children. And there's a lot of things that play into that, the age factor, the relationship they have with their father or mother, and those types of things. So Reggie and I just want to kind of touch on these subjects because it can be a great thing, but it can also be a challenging thing. So Reggie, I'll let you go ahead and set it off.
Well, before we move forward, we want to wish our colleague, our comrade, Jacqueline Wells, speedy recovery. She hasn't been feeling well, and no, it's not COVID, so hopefully no one says it's COVID, but right. She hasn't been feeling well, so let's keep her in our prayers, and we want to let Jackie know we miss you, we love you, and we'll see you on the next show.
Absolutely.
To jump on what Kenneth said, I have talked to numerous of people who have had this issue with blended families. And now, in today's time, you see more blended families now more than ever. When we was coming up as kids, I remember the majority of my friends had mothers, the original mother and fathers, and it stayed that way even through high school. Well, things change. People may die. Divorce was not that high back in the 70s and the early 80s as it took its turn in the late 80s and the 90s, where the divorce rate was high. Single parenting was even higher. And so with that, when they finally got into relationships, that man may have had kids or that mother may have had kids. So the decision was, okay, let's merge our families together into one and see what we get. Well, unfortunately, a lot of times that does not always work. And I believe because there are some, protocols that needs to be taken care of before you even get to that point of saying I do and deciding that this is something we're going to do and we're going to make it work. Now, I'm going to say this. In my marriage now, I learned from some things that did not work in my previous marriage. But the one thing that I've always been is, and I think number one has been, I've always been genuine. Especially if I found out that this person had kids, because I understood the first thing is you have to get the kids on board first. They need to know that they can trust you. They need to know that not only they can trust you with themselves, but I want to know, can I trust you with my mother? You understand? Now, if those kids are infants to where they don't know and you're coming in and they have no understanding or recollection of who you may be, that's a different story. But when you have kids who are of age or at one point in time had that father or had that mother, now before you even go those next steps with the mom, there needs to be some things that you need to do. And like for one thing that I did with my wife and her kids is that, of course, I started forging a relationship with my wife first, but there was a period of time to where I needed to start forging a relationship with her kids. So that meant sending texts. Even though I was in Indiana and she was in California at the time, I would send them texts, or I would ask how they were doing, or if I called and they happened to be around, my first thing was, before we even got started on the conversation, I said, hey, tell them I said, hey, ask them how they're doing. And then when she felt comfortable, put them on the phone. That's how we started the relationship. And if I was going to do something for their mom, I would include them. Hey, this is Reggie. Hey, I was calling. You think your mom might like this? You think your mom might want this? So getting them involved early helped bridge that gap so that I wouldn't have that tumultuous relationship, or it'd be uneasy when I first came around, because now, one, they could put the face with the voice, and they could be, okay, I haven't met him in person yet, but he sounds like he's a good person. He's including us. He's not excluding us out of the equation with our mom. So I will say this before I pass it back over to you, Kenneth. One, start forging the relationship with the kids and be authentic and be genuine, and don't be too pushy, because you have to understand that kids, when it comes to their parents, they're very guarded. You know, they, especially if they're older, they're not going to play no games. So they're going to try to do some things to try to maybe thwart the relationship or push the relationship back. But I think with everything, you have to use wisdom, understand who they are, try to understand who they are, and start including them early.
I would agree with that. The first thing I do want to say is you have to make sure that you establish a great relationship with the mother or father that you're trying to have the relationship with, because with the blended families and the challenges that come, if you two don't have a strong relationship, then some of the things that you talked about, Reggie, could literally happen, and break it down with kids trying to interrupt a relationship because they're protective over their mom. And then some kids are protective over their dad as well. So you have to make sure that the foundation you set at the beginning is a solid and a strong foundation. And before you even move to the next level, you need to make sure that this is something that you're willing to sacrifice or engage in for the long haul, because it can be tough. Um, for me, I agree with the fact that you have to definitely develop a relationship with the children, and you can't always just come in and just overwhelm the kids right away. You have to, spend the time to get to know them and be patient with them, the same way you did the person you're trying to enter the relationship with. If you don't spend the time to um, get to know them or talk to them or find out their interests or find some common ground, then you're gonna run into a situation where you're kind of standoffish, or they're kind of standoffish, or you don't even have a conversation with them because you didn't take the time out to build a relationship with them. The only thing you focused on was building a relationship with their mom or their dad. You didn't spend the time to get to know the kids, and then you come to the person you're in a relationship with, like, man, look, your kids don't like me, or we got issues, or whatever the case. And then the other thing I would say on the side of that too is that you have different uh like you said, boundaries that you have to set, because kids used to just seeing their one parent, now they have the other parent coming in, and now it's two parents. Now I got to set up a whole nother level of respect for this new person. Um, both partners have to enforce that and set the boundaries, because if those boundaries are not set on the level of respect, then it's going to cause problems in the relationship. And there should not be any situation where whether it's my child or my partner's child or whatever the case, to where we allow those kids to disrespect the adults. We may not agree with the adult, but we need to put the kids, or separate from the kids, have a conversation, and then address it. It's just a lot that comes with that. And I think that doing it the right way can avoid a lot of the issues. Now, some people are way too deep into, they're further along in the game, as we say, than to try to establish those things. And they may be, feel like they're far past that, but you can still take the time to sit down and have a conversation and just say, look, let's talk. We may not have started this thing the right way, but I really, really want the dynamics of our relationships to change so that we can have a better relationship and function as a family. You know, I for me personally, my kids, I don't really even like saying step kids, although I know they're my step kids, but I treat them just like my children. I don't treat any of them different. I wouldn't do one thing for one that I wouldn't do for the other. I'm very protective over my kids, step kids, whatever you want to title it. I'm very protective over my kids, and they know that. They know that if something goes down and they call me, I'll be there. And that's one of the things that I did from the beginning, to reassure them. Not only do I love your mom and I'm here for your mom, but I'm also here for you and I care about you. And our youngest daughter is 15 right now. She's the last one, and I'm already telling my wife, like, look, I'm having a little bit of anxiety because she'll be 16 this year, and 2 more years she's in that adulthood. This is our last one, and I'm just like, man, I don't know about this. So the protective part of me is coming out more and more, and my wife has to tell me to calm down every now and then. But my kids know me, they know what I do for them. But I don't know, Reggie. Why do you think it's so hard for people though to have those relationships with their kids or their step?
Well, I'll say this, and I'll use from my own personal experience. And I think the advantage that I had was that, I've been a therapist and I've worked in mental health and I've worked around numerous of kids over the years. And I think that one, I learned to be empathetic and sympathetic to what they may have been dealing with at that time. So let me say this. I understood the painful process of losing a father. My father died when I was 14, 15 years old. And I remember years later, my mom got remarried. Now, in our eyes, we thought that it probably wasn't done right because we didn't really know the person and because of how it was set up. So I was a little bit more open and welcoming, but I was more even defensive. But my brother was totally against it. So I understood that process because we had lost our dad, we had lost our rock, we had lost our foundation. So now having another man come in, now let me say this, my mom wasn't sleeping around. My mom was in the church, everything like that. So she did it the right way. There were just some things that went on, the church involvement that we didn't really agree with. But anyway, so when I got into I looked at other relationships and everything else like that, I had to understand that, if the kids had a relationship with their father and the father either died or there was a divorce, you have to understand that those kids there's repercussions with them as well because of the separation. Because it's not just about the mother and the father separating and dying. It's about that mother and father having kids. And then when they split, there's a split even with the kids. There's a conflict loyalty. There's some things that go on. So if you come in and don't necessarily have the facts as to what happened, you can't be empathetic and sympathetic. So I came in already understanding that, hey, their father's no longer in their lives. And so now you're stepping in and, they don't know, are you going to step in and try to be like my dad? Are you going to step in and try to, take authority or whatever like that? They're going to have their guards up. So my wife had 3 kids, right? And so each of them I had to deal with differently. Now, the youngest one, she was very open and very welcoming, like I was with my mom and, her situation. The other 2 was a little bit harder. But then I also had to understand that there's also a difference in the relationship between the daughter and the father, and then the son and their father, the daughter and the mother, and the son and their mother. Where the other daughter, she was on guard, like, hey, what's going on? I'm the oldest. I'm gonna be very protective of my mom. So I had to deal with that one differently. But then there was the son, and then we all know that there's a difference. There's a strong bond between daughter and father, and even very strong bond between son and mother. So I had to even deal with that even differently. So I had to bring them along kind of one by one, but I was also sympathetic and empathetic to what was going on, what had transpired. And then what I did was that once I felt that they were comfortable and I was comfortable, then we can all sit down, we can kind of talk. I started understanding their likes and dislikes. I knew when their birthdays were. Like my oldest daughter, she had already had a kid. I started building a relationship even with her daughters. Even with her daughter. You understand what I'm saying? So you have to be wise. And what does the Bible say? As wise as a serpent and as
harmless as a dove.
As harmless as a dove. So I had to use wisdom, and I had to let them know, hey, I'm not like the average guy out there. I'm genuine, and I really care about your mom. And then the next thing is that they needed to see how a man treats a woman. You understand what I'm saying? They needed to know that, hey, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that if something happened, Reggie's going to be there for my mom. So I don't have to worry about that. And they got a chance to see that early. Even with me being long distance, I called, I sent things. I was making sure they was okay. And if something was wrong with her, I was operating, calling through the kids. You understand? So I was using wisdom on it. And like you said, I didn't come on too strong. I understand that timing is everything. But another thing too, Kenneth, and you took the words right out of my mouth. I have never used the word step anything. I haven't. Now, other people that do it, that's fine. But when you start using, oh, this is because I have a son too, a son and a daughter. Oh, this is my stepdaughter. This is my stepson. To me, it causes some type of division. You understand what I'm saying? So when I knew that, after the engagement and we was moving towards marriage, you know what I'm saying? I started saying, if we were out, this is my daughter, this is my son. You know what I'm saying? So now it's not me taking ownership, but it's also me taking responsibility, for them as well. So not only am I going to protect your mother, I'm also going to protect her kids. So when our kids are even together, if we're all under one roof, I don't treat either of them differently. I might handle them differently because they're different individuals. But if we're all out, these are our kids. My wife does the same thing. This is my son and that's my daughter. And I say, these are my sons and my daughter. So with everything, sometimes we rush into relationships and we think by saying hi and bye and a couple of little things with the kids is okay. I'm going to focus on the mom. No. As you build that relationship with the mom, like you said, you also need to start balancing out that relationship with the mother and the daughter, because I have heard, and I was also under the impression and the notion that, hey, if you don't accept my kids, we might have an issue. You understand what I'm saying? And I felt that my wife was the same way. If you can't accept my kids, if you can't accept the whole package, and even though our kids were they were much older, way, way, way much older, in their teens, and everything else like that, then you really can't accept me. So again,
Right.
balance out the relationship, and don't show any division or with the step this and step that. Start taking ownership, but not ownership, but responsibility.
I think you said a lot of things that's important. And the reality of the fact is you can't just establish a relationship with a parent and not establish the relationship with the kid, because it comes with the territory. And again, if I think that people who struggle in these areas, they may have taken the time just to focus on the mom and not focus on the kids, or even take the time to get to know them, or they just don't accept them for who they are. And I think that's the biggest problem, that we want people to be a certain way or kids to be a certain way, and we don't accept them, as who they are. That's when they drift off into relationships with other people or other things. And so I feel personally that my wife developed a relationship with my children, and they have great relationships, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud to say that I have relationships with my kids as well, with her kids as well. So I forget the step thing. They're my kids regardless of whether their dad's in their life, and people should feel that way, whether the dad's in the life or not, or the mom's in the life or not. They are, your kids, especially if you take this responsibility. So just that's to kind of drift off for a second. Why do you think most kids are standoffish, from step parents or whatever the case? I hate the labels, but just for the sake of people to understand what we're talking about, why do you think they become standoffish?
One, I think it's because maybe at one point in time, the whole truth wasn't told to them, or they were surprised with this situation because they didn't know.
So
of course,
so when you talk about whole truth, you're gonna have to break that down. Like the whole truth about what, or the relationship, or what,
the relationship. And because when I would talk to kids or even the older ones, there was so much animosity, because they were like, once they found out, they were like, oh, so you were dating this man for a year and a half and I didn't know. So automatically that puts up walls, and it also makes it bad for the person that's coming along that did not know, that the kids didn't even know. You understand what I'm saying? That's one. And I think two, I think at some point in time why they might be standoffish, because Now there's a difference between that parent not being around. Now they're still going to deal with that hurt at the same time of the parent not being around, and then also not being with the husband. I mean, the mother or the father, because sometimes when there's a divorce, a split, there's a real split. They split for real, and the kids are no longer involved, or they may have started other families. So they're also dealing with that hurt as well. But there's this thing to where, okay, even though mommy and daddy are not together, the kids still have a relationship with both of them. You understand what I'm saying? So now this other person comes in. So now I have to call you mom or dad or whatever else like that. So that's a struggle for them as well. So automatically other walls come up as well. Or, they're so tied into that mother and father that it's impossible for anybody to come in. And that makes the forging of the relationship even carry on even longer, because now it might not be your fault. And you might have, like, say you have 2 or 3 other siblings. The other 2 siblings may have jumped on board, but you might have that one that's like, I don't care what y'all say. I don't like him. He ain't my daddy. He ain't my mama. I'm never going to subscribe to this or whatever. So they might be operating in rebellion, and then you have another issue with that.
Right. So I just want to rewind back to something really quick, because you were talking about somebody dating for somebody maybe at dating 18 months before they get introduced with the kid. We deal with the issue of timing. When is the right time to introduce anybody? Because you have people who jump out of a relationship, then jump into another relationship, and it's not even a couple of days later, you're introducing them to the mom, the kids, the whole entire family, and the kids are like, hold on, how long have you known this guy? You get what I'm saying? So that's like a two-edged sword. You've been dating this guy all this time. You didn't say anything to me. You just met this guy, and you just all of a sudden bringing him around us, and you don't even know him yet. So you got that factor of that. And I agree with the other part where you said that you may have some siblings that won't warm up to anybody else because they're so connected to their other parent. I think that everybody can have a relationship with the kids, whether the other parents are involved or not. I think it's personal choices. I think it's approach. I think everybody has to be willing to compromise and do what needs to do to have that relationship. But I want to go back to my question, because timing is everything. How soon is too soon to introduce kids, or when is the right time?
See, I had a different answer until you changed the equation about jumping out of one relationship and then jumping into another relationship, where time is still essential.
Right.
But at the same time, when you're dealing with older kids, they're smart. They learn how to put 2 and 2 together. They're like, so you and daddy divorced or split in April, and you're with this guy in May. So were you with this guy in January or August of last? I mean, they start putting 2 and 2 together, and sometimes 2 and 2 don't equal 4. So now you have to give an account to what's going on, because then they're going to start looking at you funny. You know what I'm saying? Portraying you as this and that, and it might not be the case. So right. I think, in the words of Jackie, we love you, Jackie, we miss you. Jackie says, have the conversation.
Have the
conversation. So, because me and my wife's situation was somewhat similar, but yet different at the same time, we continue to have these conversations about when would be the right time. You understand what I'm saying? So there had to be a conversation that needed to be had. Now, there might be a time where it might never be a good time, depending on the outlook from the kid's perspective. You understand what I'm saying? But I think that if you got out of a relationship and there's been some time for you to heal, for one, and then also some time for the kids to kind of learn how to navigate through the emotions and the bitterness and the being angry and everything else like that. I think that person who has the kids, who have the kids, you need, like with my son, I started talking about my wife early. And at first, I remember he wasn't asking any questions. I would throw her name out there just to see if I would get some type of bite of response. And for a while, he wouldn't say anything. Then all of a sudden, he came and asked me, he said, hey, Dad, who's Diana? I'm like, okay. So then I started slowly telling him about it. He was okay. And then there were times I was talking, it'd be too much for him. He would go upstairs and do something else. Then he came back and asked, and I
Wait,
immediately,
hold on. Let me stop you right there. You said there were times you would be talking and it would be too much for him. Then he would go upstairs. What were you talking about?
well, I would be
I'm
talking about
joking.
her. I would be talking just about her.
I thought you were
And
talking with her and he overheard the
oh, no, no,
conversation.
no, 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 no. I would be talking about her, and then after a while, I would notice he'd kind of shut down in his mind. Okay, I didn't want to hear all of that. I just wanted to know who she was. I didn't need a description and everything else like that. And then he started coming back. He said, "So what's this Diana like? You know, where does she live? You know, different things like that." So I was very strategic in how I brought her along with him, and even still. He wasn't taking daddy's word for it so much. He trusts me, but I remember talking to him one time. He said, I was just kind of just sitting back and watching. And then once I talked to her, she matched your description and she lined up with everything that you said. So therefore my walls came down. You understand what I'm saying? Because in between the interim between the split from his mom, and everything like that. I had some other relationships, and and kept forgetting that he was still being affected as well, because he was so used to seeing me and his mother together for 15 to 16 years. You understand what I'm saying? So I think it just takes wisdom and the timing, and both adults need to have a discussion. Take your time off of each other, and now let's start talking about how we're going to do this, how we're going to bring the kids along. What do we need to tell them at this point in time? Because my biggest fear was that when it came time for me to towards the engagement process, I made sure that I involved them in it. Hey, you guys like this ring? You know,
Right.
because one of them I wasn't getting a response back real quick. The other one's like, "Oh, I don't like that. My mom likes this." And then the other one saw the other one kind of jumping on. They're like, "All right, well, I jump on too." And it helped a big deal.
Yeah. So I kind of was in the same situation. So I was developing a relationship with my wife's kids, and so before I asked her the question to marry me, I did talk to her son because he was the only man in her life. So I pulled him, even though he wasn't of age. I still pulled him to the side, went and had lunch with him, and told him what I was thinking about doing, and asked him how he felt about it. And I said, "Do I have your blessing?" He gave me his blessing. Now, most people will probably say, "You don't need that," blah 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 blah. But I'm sorry, I have a different view of it. I was raised a little bit different, and that's what I decided to do, to say, hey, just so you know that I respect you, respect your feelings and opinion, and I really respect your mother and I care about your mom a lot. I want to get your insight on it, and to him that did something, and we've had a great relationship since. I think that uh, the most difficult part of this whole deal is for those kids that don't have the other parent around, whether the parent is just not actively involved or not alive or whatever the case. I think that can be a challenge, to the person coming in, and they're like, well, my daddy wasn't there. They probably put walls up. Like, how long are you going to be here? You probably going to leave too. So you don't really know what that issue is that they're dealing with, why they're possibly resisting the new parent or whatever the case. And like Jackie says, a conversation need to be had. You know, I think that could be one of the biggest challenges. And I would personally never make it them call me dad or whatever the case. That's their choice. It would be nice, but my kids call me by my first name. My wife's kids call me by my first name, and I'm okay with that because that's their level of comfort. I'm not going to force them to say, no, you need to call me daddy. No, that's ignorant. And I'm good on that. But the love is there. They care about me deeply the same way that I care about them. And I think that's an amazing thing. It can definitely be beautiful if everybody puts forth the effort. Now, for those people that don't have a relationship with the kids, sometimes kids are rebellious, sometimes they're disrespectful, but you need to get to the reason why. Why are you acting this way? And if you don't take the time, if you just back off and don't have the conversation or run from the conversation, then it's going to be impossible for you to have a great relationship with that mother or father because of how you're treating those kids, or your maturity level to where you're not mature enough to sit down and have a conversation and say, you know what, I may have made some mistakes and along the way, I'm taking responsibility for that. How can we fix this? What can we do? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And let me say this, and here's the one of the main things that could be a reason why it takes a while for the kids to come along. The other parent is not on board with it. You know, give you an example. Some men hate to see their kids around another man. So while those kids are with him, you know, they're saying certain things and they're showing their disapproval, they're showing their resentment or whatever like that. And those kids take hold of that. And that can slow down the process as well. And I give an example with my kid's mother. We were married, like I said, we were together 16 years. But prior to all of that, when I first met my daughter, she was a little bit over one. Okay. And immediately, like I said, forged a relationship. I mean, we were kicking it. You know, it was like you would have thought that she was my biological daughter. Well, when the biological father started coming back in and started seeing that I was around, and he started taking trying to live up to his responsibility. So I remember at one point in time, she went from calling me daddy, and then when she would come back from being with him, she would call me by my first name. You know, okay, and I was like, well, dang, what switch? Come to find out, he was saying different things. He was mad, and then his family was saying certain things. That's not your father. Don't call him daddy. So now she has this what they call conflict loyalty. You understand what I'm saying? I love him, but I also love him. What do I do? And here's the thing also, not only do you have to have that conversation with those kids, but someone, especially if it's the mother, needs to have that conversation with that biological father. Hey, you know, no, we're not together anymore, but I probably don't need to, but I should tell you I'm in another relationship. Because now if that ex finds out you're in another relationship and they still may have feelings, whew, you got some issues now, because he or she might not necessarily show that to you,
Right.
but it's now going to be reflected upon the kids. So now when they come back from being with mama or daddy for the weekend or whatever else like that, now this person may have filled their minds with certain things and may have
Right.
tried to switch their loyalties and everything else like that. And therefore you have an issue. The one thing that I have been, and this is the thing that amazes people with me and my situation, when they find out that the first question is, whew, so how do you get along with the father? I don't have no issue with the father. When we see each other at function, we dap it up, hug, we sit there, we'll have a whole conversation by ourselves. And we're not talking about the kids or the mom or whatever like that. We're having another conversation that helps the kids as well, because the kids are paying attention. Oh, he gets along with my dad too? Oh, easy peasy. You understand what I'm saying? But if there's a function and then that father happens to come around, the mother comes around for a birthday or whatever like that, and there's tension, those kids feel that tension as well. So that person, either that mother or that father, needs to have a conversation, because they have a right to know who's around my son or my daughter. So conversations need to be had all the way across the board, even if they're uncomfortable conversations, uneasy conversation. It needs to be done, because at that point in time, it might be about you and him. It's also about the kids. And if the kids understand that, hey, they get along with the father, or they get along with my mom, then that helps that relationship, and that takes the pressure off of the kids, because it doesn't matter how old they are. If you get with the kids and they're 19 or 20, it still makes a difference, because whatever may have happened in the relationship, you know, they still love their dad, they still love their mom. But
Right.
if everybody can come together in love, man, that makes the situation so much better.
It would be beautiful, but it ain't always like that, because now you
No,
got some
no.
psychotic parents, psychotic moms or dads and all that.
Yep.
And you know, they still holding on to stuff from 10, 15,
Yep.
20 years ago. And it's just ridiculous. You know, I think that if people would get out of themselves and out of their feelings, then they can get into the feelings of other people and really understand their disposition and why they're reacting that way. You know, so um, we might have to pick this conversation up again another time, because it's to me, I think that this will help a lot of people that don't know how should I approach this situation, or I'm in this situation, what should I do, or how should I carry, or how can we fix these things? You know, again, like Jackie always says, have the
The
conversation. If you
conversation.
have the
Have the
conversation,
conversation.
then you can just go ahead and begin to break down those walls. But if you don't make the effort, if you try to put all these preconditions on the relationships or all these stipulations versus just trying to have a relationship and letting it develop into the relationship it needs to be, then you're going to continue to have these issues, and then it's going to be a stumbling block for marriage or relationships. These things need to be addressed, they need to be dealt with. But like you were saying, it could be a beautiful relationship if we would just had a conversation.
Yeah, you need to have a conversation. It's imperative. It's important. And like we said before, timing of the conversations, and you need to be strategic with the conversations and how you do things because kids are always watching. And I'll say this before we get ready to go. I have my pictures in my office, of our family, and people will come in and be like, "Oh man, how many kids that you have?" I tell them we have five, and so then they'll sit down and start talking about who looks like who looks like who. And the crazy thing is that if you look at our pictures, my son looks like he could be my wife's kid. And we have our other daughter. She looks like she could be mine. And that's what they always say. Cause the blend is so good. You know what I'm saying? It's like blending two different ingredients together and it comes out so good. You know what I'm saying? And then, so we'll sit down and talk about it. Be like, wow, how did you do that? And when you tell them the story, they're amazed. And you hear them say, I need to try that because, we have some issues over here, or wow, I never thought to do that. So hopefully what we've said may have, opened up the eyes to some things because people just don't know, because sometimes they just jump right in the conversation, jump right into the relationship and get into the relationship. And then later on be like, oops, we forgot about the kid. You cannot forget about the kids. The kids need to always be in the forefront while you're trying to forge this relationship. So again, like you said, Kenneth, we may have to have another conversation, but have the conversation, the appropriate conversation, and use timing, but also be guided and use wisdom at the end of the day.
Yep. And don't just use wisdom, but get some understanding of the situation.
Facts.
If you don't have understanding of it, then you're going to make mistakes. You're going to be stuck in the situation. Things will be very hard and difficult. But till next time, keep your head up, keep God first,
and keep it moving.